Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lincoln Journal-Star's Life in the Red podcast. We got three-person crew once again: Amie, Just, Luke Mullin, Wilson Moore. I want to break down all things spring games, spring football. We got some basketball updates, recruiting, baseball and softball still going on as usual. So a lot to get to. But spring game, it's here in the books. We kind of went through, this spring camp. There's a lot going on, a lot of questions, but a lot of those were answered, over the course of this spring. So we'll have some takeaways to share. But first, just want to get our reaction to the spring game, starting with new Herbie Husker riding in on a motorcycle. I mean, that was a little bit of a spectacle, wasn't it?
Of course. My favorite, though, was like the Gatlin gun, like t-shirt guns.
Yes. Yes.
Phenomenal. That needs to stay.
When one t-shirt at a time is too few and you're firing out like 10 a second, I mean, it
was pretty funny.
It's impressive. Fun engagement for the fans, too.
The motorcycle ride was preceded by a very carefully edited hype video for Herbie Husker. I think we can't forget about that part, too.
Oh, yeah, the hype video for the mascot, too. Yeah, things were taken up a notch there. But, getting into the actual on-field action, I think one of the things we were looking forward to was seeing Jeff Sims, seeing him in this offense, seeing how he operated. And, obviously starting unit, they only get a few series, want to limit their time out there. But I thought he looked good, strong arm, strong command of the offense. Ran a little bit, didn't take too many big hits, but thought he looked pretty sharp in his first outing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't know what else to expect. Like, I wanted a little bit more running from him, whether that be, designed runs or scrambles. I think that's the only thing that I was missing there. But again, it's a spring game and time is limited, so I wasn't too upset about it.
Absolutely. I mean, pretty accurate with his throws, too. Did what he needed to do. And, there was kind of a contrast there, though. You had some of the backup quarterbacks, those guys, and, you missed those windows by half a second, or, you're off just a little bit on your throws. So Sims definitely stood out to me in that regard, just how sharp he was. But, when you're kind of looking at the offense as a whole, it was like all the action pretty much came in the first half. That scoring came quickly. And then the second half, it was really a lot of fumbles. I mean, there were fumbles in the first, but they really showed up in the second half.
Yeah. And on the topic of Sims, this might be a bit of an oversimplification, but just watching, I thought it was obvious of the quarterbacks, he was the one who had played college football before. He was the one who was seasoned, who seemed to have kind of been through this process before, just understood things better, processed things more quickly. But yeah, and the fumbles, it's spring. That's obviously not what you want to see. Matt Rule wasn't thrilled about that after the game, but I know it's hard to pin down one thing on that, I think.
Yeah, I would say the thing with the fumbles, though, is, it's just spring, but I don't think you fumble 8 times in the spring game if you're not kind of struggling with that all spring, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Matt had talked about that the week before, that ball security was something he was a little worried about, something he wanted to, shore up, make better, and clearly that didn't happen. But again, it's April, so.
Yeah, and some of that, just like quarterback, running back exchange, some of that stuff that you get a lot of reps in, that stuff will come. And that's probably one of the biggest things from the spring game was that it took a while. There were a lot of plays, a lot of reps for different players, different units. They really, made sure, as you do with these scrimmages, to, get those guys in there at the end. Even in the fourth quarter, Rule was, he was very impressed, I guess, with the guys' attitude that they wanted to keep going out there, keep playing when it got down, really late there in the contest. But at the same time, post game, he did kind of acknowledge, he said there were some lulls that second half, and that getting the team to focus for an entire 3 hours was a goal. I think that's kind of interesting to hear from him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long spring for them too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, and this is probably the longest practice that they had, right? With a halftime. Like, that's a lot. And for some of those guys, this is about the longest that they've, had to do this, right? Because there were some true freshmen there, and then some younger guys who haven't necessarily been called upon before that, got ample playing time in the spring game. So it's a learning experience for all of them.
Yeah. Test your conditioning, but test your mental focus too. Yes. That was one of those big points. But I'm glad you brought up the freshmen too, because we saw a couple guys really there on the defensive line, heard about them in the spring, but again, we only see a little bit of snippets of practice. We hear from their position coaches or, some of their teammates, but Prince Will, Mullin, Cam Lenhart, those guys were creating havoc there and not really looking like freshmen at all.
No, not at all. And I don't think it was a huge surprise. I think especially with Prince Will, Tony White had talked about how impressive he had been. But yeah, seeing the first kind of extended action from them, like you said, didn't look like freshmen. Mullin had a big sack, I think, on second or third down in the first half. I'm remembering correctly. Got into the backfield well, got good pressure, and yeah, I think adds a dynamic to what this pass rush could look like. That was already pretty well stocked with guys like MJ Sherman. Just just someone else who can contribute to that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd heard that they were working in, rotating with the ones, but when you see them out there, you see them producing it. It definitely adds a little bit more confidence. They look just like those other veterans there. And one of the other things that we were keeping an eye on was the offensive line. Knew that they were a little bit low on numbers, had a couple guys get banged up, Turner Corcoran, Jacob Hood, but no serious injuries. Really one of those key things that you want to get in and out of this spring game. You don't want any guys like tearing ACL or something, that's going to rule them out of the fall, of course. So that was a major positive to take away. And one of the things that I think, this game will be remembered for, it won't be, some of these different things, these different quarterback or defensive end. I think it'll be remembered for Frank Solich coming back, finally getting his moment and, getting some of those tough feelings out.
Yeah, so I was on the field for that, just watching not just Frank's family, but all of the former players who were there. And it was a really emotional moment for everybody. A lot of those guys had lumps in their throat, holding back tears. It was a moment that you could tell meant a lot to them because Frank hadn't been back in Memorial Stadium for almost 20 years. And, we don't need to litigate what happened. But that's a long time to be away from a place that he called home for so long. And he meant so much. He's not dead. He means so much to people. And for him to come back and not just come back, but to be honored with the 45s on the field for his number when he was a player and to have the new locker room be named after him, you could tell it meant a lot, not just to him, but to everybody who had a close relationship with him and to the fans who may or may not have ever met him before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to see him be kind of celebrated in that way, it was a long time coming, right? Because you go through these years, these decades, and I don't know, maybe if you're Solich, you're going, do they even still care about me there? Well, when you see thousands and thousands of people, cheering, getting on their feet for you, I'm sure that was a really special moment. And then one of the other things I think was cool too was, seeing kids, interested in him, wanting to, take a picture, get an autograph, whatever it may be, a coach that was before their time, sure, but still one of those really important, members of this Nebraska football history, a guy who's meant a lot to the program, meant a lot to Lincoln, the entire community. So really cool to see, and I think a really nice gesture naming the locker room after him. Definitely. So spring game now in the books. That's 15 practices, all 15 done, and want to take a little bit of a bigger picture, looking back at this entire spring. Always a great chance for players to step up, maybe raise their stock on the depth chart a little bit, or at least make sure that the coaches have them in mind. They're heading into the fall. So each of us, we've got a couple of players to share with you who we think had a really good spring. Let's start with you, Amie.
Yeah, we've talked about him already, so I don't need to go too much into it. But Prince Will, what a fantastic spring for the freshman.
Yeah, I mean, just to share a quick note too, I mean, he came in, by the way, as one of the highest ranked recruits in that 23 class, only behind Malachi Coleman. But for me, I was kind of like, oh, he's got these great traits, maybe in a year or two, he'll be really good. Well, he's really good right now. So for me, I'm definitely looking at Junior and Bonner, making that kind of transition there to this tight end kind of role, and now a fullback. Yeah, that we saw him there at the spring game. I mean, he looked dynamic. Of course, from coming from wide receiver, he's going to have the ability to catch, to run a little bit. But I mean, he was throwing blocks. He was leading in the interior gaps. I mean, he was a bona fide fullback, exactly what you want to see from him. So really impressed with him, his ceiling in the offense, and another guy that just want to touch on real quick, Gage Stanger. Limited action last year, really kind of easing his way into things, but I think he's going to be a great fit there in that linebacker spot, good in coverage, made a couple plays and run stopping as well. So a young guy, I think there to keep your eye on the defense, Gage Stanger. Wilson, who you got?
Billy Kemp IV stood out to me, especially last Saturday, the transfer receiver from Virginia. We knew what he could do. We knew he was fast, but I think he showed how he could kind of fit into this offense a little more. He doesn't just have, what we saw is he doesn't just have like a straight line speed. He's pretty nimble. He's got good feet. He can make plays from the slot, which I think is something was kind of a question mark in this Nebraska receiver room. I think he showed what he can be in a few months.
Oh, definitely. I think, you look at Kemp and, he's a veteran. He's a guy who's played a lot. We already kind of had this idea that he was going to come in as one of those top receiving options. But yeah, just seeing him out there in the spring game, I was impressed. He finds pockets of space, and that is going to be so huge there in the fall. Building that chemistry with Sims, we saw a couple nice, quick passes from him. It seems like they have a really good connection already. So Kemp, another big one there to watch. Good spring from him as well, making his name up that wide receiver chart. But at the same time, still going through the spring game. There's still some issues, some things that they need to shore up. And Amie, we'll start with you. We saw those fumbles, right?
Yeah, ball security is the thing that concerns me the most, especially because it wasn't necessarily all like one type of thing.
Yeah.
You could flip it and be like, oh, the defense got the ball out. That's great. But there's no excuse. You need to shore up those handoffs. Make sure that you have proper placement of the ball when you're getting hit. And just knowing where you are and where the ball is and everything else that goes into it, they need to figure that out.
Yeah, if we're talking the same way about fumbles in September, there's going to be an issue. So definitely that's a major thing for them to address in the fall. For me, it's the O-line depth because we saw it there just a little bit. Corcoran goes down. Yes, there are guys that can move around. They've kind of been building with this idea that guys can play multiple positions, but ultimately, the stress is the physicality of O-line. I think it's very likely that a couple guys get injured or at least, dinged up, have to miss a couple weeks there in the fall. So hopefully, the second string unit, we've heard they've had a good spring, see if they can keep progressing there in the fall, but really interested to see the incoming freshmen, several in-state guys, a couple of them, Mason Goldman and Jason Masichak from South Dakota. They're going to play both ways or at least have that potential coming in. So not sure if they're going to be there on offense, but Sam Sledge, Brock Knudsen, and a walk-on Grant Segrin, they're all coming in there to shore up that O-line. So if any of them can kind of, make their name and at least, add solid depth, I think that'll add a lot so that, Nebraska knows they've got at least backups at all these different spots. So O-line depth, that's something I'm looking at. Wilson, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to the other side, looking at the defensive line, especially the interior. I think a lot of questions were answered about who can rush the passer. Guys like MJ Sherman. Where I do think there's still a few question marks, kind of who can be that inside, kind of nose guard, traditional run stopper. Maybe someone like Elijah Judy, but I don't think anyone emerged in that specific role. Prince Will kind of played all up and down the line. He told us, and that's part of Tony White's thing, that he wants guys being able to play all three spots he runs in that system, but I don't think there's any obvious candidate for who consistently will get those reps lining up in front of the center and the interior of the line.
Yeah, definitely. Ty Robinson, Stephon Wynn, those are the guys that are experienced. You might think of them for that role, but again, you never know who's going to emerge there in the fall, especially, as you said, when there wasn't necessarily a guy who took that and ran with it here in the spring. So having gone through this practice schedule, now they're finally past that, getting into the last week of April and into May. The question is what's next for the football team. And right now it's post-spring meetings. We've heard that from Matt Rule, just about how important that is, sitting down with the guys and just talking about them, about what their role is probably going to be on the team next year, just kind of what their standing is, making sure everybody's on the same page. And, these meetings will be very important because, by the way, Nebraska is over the scholarship limit by quite a few.
It's like 12-ish?
Yep, definitely over 10. Some of these numbers, we're dealing with them on the fly here, but yeah, there are quite a few players that are going to need to enter the transfer portal or explore other options. And by the way, movement starting today. First transfer portal entry, redshirt freshman quarterback Richard Torres. I know this feels like a long time ago, but he was recruited to Nebraska by quarterbacks coach Mario Verduzco and Scott Frost. Sat out 2022 after a knee injury. I think we've heard he has a strong arm, but a lot of competition in that QB room. 4 years of eligibility to it. It kind of makes sense for him to go after a fresh start.
Yeah. Don't forget about Jarrett Sinak. He entered the transfer portal last week.
Yep, absolutely.
So many moving pieces, but yeah,
Yep.
no. And it doesn't surprise me that both Jarrett and Richard entered the transfer portal. They're talented guys, but just buried down the depth chart.
So tough at quarterback too. Obviously, you only get one guy out there versus some of these other positions. We've seen kind of a surplus, lots and lots of bodies there. Wide receiver is one of those spots too. There's a lot of freshmen coming in too. So redshirt freshman Victor Jones Jr. was the second today on Tuesday entering the portal. Same story, redshirted last year. So 4 years of eligibility for him remaining. Best of luck to him as he looks for a new spot to play his college football. But along with these meetings they have going on, players will start going through off-season workouts. Head strength coach Corey Campbell, he's going to have plans for all these guys, and in particular, some of the different position-specific training that they will go through over the summer. 2023 signees will also be able to enroll there in classes at Nebraska for the summer. That would let them, start working out the team facility. Something to look forward to those other guys getting there on campus and getting working. And of course, the recruiting trail. It will be busy. Nebraska coaches will be out and about. And by the way, we're already in the spring evaluation period that runs April 15th to May 31st. Quiet period in June, dead period in July to follow. A little bit of details here on the recruiting. This is the final season of old recruiting rules. Staffs get a total of 168 evaluation days. This is for the April to May period. Again, this is a 6-week period. So those 168 days, those are split amongst the staff, going out to various recruits. I know it seems like a lot, but there's a lot of assistants on staff. They have a lot of targets to get to. And the new recruiting rules, by the way, kicking into effect there in August, that will be down to 140 evaluation days moving forward. But we talk about recruiting, a couple new commits on the board as well. Miami, Florida edge rusher Willis McGahee IV, son of a former NFL running back. You remember Willis McGahee, Willis?
I do. Feel really old hearing he has a kid going to college.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. Like, man, wasn't he just playing for the Broncos the other day? But anyway, his son, the fourth, Willis McGahee IV, Nashville pass rusher. Nebraska really likes the idea of him playing jack linebacker. So he committed there pretty quickly. Things came about fast, got that offer in January, got to Nebraska last month, and then really liked what he saw, strong relationships, and decided to commit there on the day of the spring game. And soon followed a second commit there, another guy from Texas. We've talked about this recruiting pipeline quite a bit from Katy, Texas at Taylor High School. Tight end Ian Flint, a really strong connection with Nebraska. His parents, both former track and field participants there in the 90s. His older sister, Amelia, currently a thrower there on the track team. So a lot going on with that Flint family. Really excited to see, all their athletic tradition, come out to play there. But, Ian still, he talked about how his family, they wanted him to make that decision for himself. And ultimately Bob Wagner, Texas through and through. He's been a great high school coach down there already. He's going to be coaching Flint. It just made a lot of sense, didn't it?
Yeah. And look, he, from the little bit I've seen, I don't pay as much attention to recruiting as you do. That is a difficult thing to keep up with all of it. He's more of like a strong blocker, and that shouldn't affect anything with any other potential recruiting of other tight ends out there. Maybe Carter Nelson, perhaps. But yeah, I like the fit. It makes sense. You go where you feel like is home. And when you have a guy like, Bob, potentially, being in your new family, so to speak, it just makes sense.
Definitely. And like you said, I'd kind of liken Flint to kind of a Chancellor Brewington, a guy who can pop up there in the red zone, like really good blocker, can still catch passes, be kind of that all-around versatile tight end. And like you said, a lot of interest there still with Ainsworth, Carter Nelson, more of a receiver. And of course, with this Marcus Satterfield offense, we're getting used to these multiple tight end sets. It's not a case like in years past where you take one tight end and you're kind of good for the class. So that's your recruiting update. More to follow as those coaches go out there on the road. But want to get into some of our other sports, more updates to share. Let's start with Nebraska basketball. The men's team star guard, Keisei Tominaga. We'd been kind of waiting. We'd heard, is he going to enter the draft? Is he going to go professional? Well, we finally got the news. He did enter the NBA draft, but retaining his eligibility. That means he's going to go through these pre-draft workouts, get feedback from scouts at the draft combine, and they kind of let you know. I think that they grade you like first round, second round, undrafted. I'm not exactly sure. Can't say I've gone through the NBA scouting combine myself, but really useful for these players to go through. And for Keisei, again, keeping that eligibility, the door is open, but he's interested there in the NBA.
Yeah, and that's his lifelong dream, right? He's known as the Japanese Steph Curry. Steph tweets at him every once in a while. It's actually kind of cool, but yeah, it just makes sense, right? Keisei, because his dream is the NBA. What do you need to do? What do you need to do? You need to get evaluated by the people who know best, right? And so it just makes sense. I've said it all off season that this is probably what he's going to do. And this is what he's done. I don't know if he will get invited to the NBA Combine, but there is a new-ish. It's been around for a little bit. The G League Combine. I can't talk today. I can see him getting invited to that. Same sort of thing. For me, it just makes sense that he did this. It wouldn't surprise me if he comes back after getting evaluated and learning that maybe this isn't the year. But I mean, what a tool and how helpful this is for guys who want to get there and know they've got one more year of eligibility. So let's see if they can figure it out. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's just great that they have that set up so that you can keep your eligibility and go through this process, because I think probably what a lot of players find is, sometimes they might go through that process and, the scouts get back to them like, hey, you work on this area of your game, you might be 20 picks higher next year, or, whatever it may be. It's just really important to get that feedback and learn from that. And like you said, that's his dream. So if it all goes to plan, I mean, you might end up sticking with that. But May 31st, by the way, the deadline to withdraw from that draft process, return to Nebraska if he chooses. And the other quick men's basketball update we have here, got the schedule from the Big Ten for the 2023-24 season. 23-24 is like, okay, we're already in the future here. But Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. Those are all the opponents that Nebraska will face twice. Only one game series against all the other teams there. That includes Michigan State, Purdue, and Iowa. Nebraska only playing Iowa on the road this year. No home date against the Hawkeyes this season.
Dumb. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Well, it's already, there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten, and wait, they're adding two more.
I know, but it just makes sense to play your rivals twice. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever.
Don't worry, they get Rutgers twice. So
whoop-de-doo.
that one will fire up all the fans both in Lincoln and in East Piscataway. That one's for sure. But anyway, we want to get into our usual update here at the end, softball and baseball. We'll start with softball team. Really exciting 3-game series that they had there against Wisconsin. Starting off with a walk-off. I mean, that's pretty fun there to open it up on Friday.
Yeah, from Alina Felix, a freshman who hasn't really been part of the starting lineup for most of the season. So yeah, definitely not one of the usual suspects you would expect to get a big hit in that situation. So pretty cool for her. And yeah, weird series. The offense kind of shut down after that first game, but enough to take 2 of 3 from Wisconsin, set up a pretty big series, probably the biggest of the season this weekend at Northwestern.
Yeah, definitely. That Friday game, by the way, Courtney Wallace pitched all 10 innings of that. So good job to her. I imagine that was pretty taxing out there. pitching 10 innings. But as you mentioned, even on Saturday, Wisconsin, they came back in that one, scored 3 runs in the 7th inning, and then really tight 2-1 win there on Sunday. Just 4 hits, but another great outing by Courtney Wallace. I think she's got 20-plus wins there now, really having herself a fantastic year. But as you mentioned, Nebraska 32-14, 12-5 in the Big Ten, tied for second in the conference with Indiana. But number 22 Northwestern, 15-2 in Big Ten play, 3-game series coming up at them, and such a huge one too, because you kind of look at the national college softball landscape. Obviously it's SEC, Big 12, ACC teams. Well, Northwestern, they're ranked. They're a very highly regarded opponent. It's going to do them a lot of good to come away with some wins in this one.
Yeah. Nebraska's chances at winning the Big Ten regular season title are pretty slim. They're 3 back of Northwestern, but for them to have any chance, it has to start this weekend. A sweep would bring them into a tie. That's unlikely to happen, but even just putting a dent into that, taking 2 would cut to 2 games back with going into the last series. But yeah, just a chance for Nebraska to really sharpen up against a quality opponent before the Big Ten tournament in a couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Testing itself against the best that you're going to get in the conference going to be huge, and only 2 series left before they get into the Big Ten tournament. Always think, softball, it starts a little bit earlier, and then I'm like, oh, geez, we're already talking about the Big Ten tournament. It's not even May yet, but 2 series left to get that done and see what they can do. Again, having a very good year, second in the Big Ten at the moment. Moving on to baseball, they were also second in the Big Ten, but really, really rough weekend. Disastrous kind of 3-game sweep there. Iowa gets to them. Friday pitching had been really good, but Iowa got to Emmett Olson, knocked him out of the game there in less than 3 innings there on Friday. Hit the Nebraska bullpen as well. That was an 11-6 win. And just not good enough at the plate in the next 2 games after that. Iowa won 8-0 on Saturday, 6-1 on Sunday to secure the sweep. 9 total hits for Nebraska in those 2 games. Really a tough one because the regular season chances were already not crucial, to make the postseason. Their RPI was already kind of a little bit low, but Iowa was pretty much the best team other than Maryland. They were going to see the rest of the time, and lose all 3, your rival. It's a tough one.
Yeah, you don't like to see that.
Tough one for Will Bolt and his crew. He was not happy there in his post-game appearance there on Sunday, talking about how, yeah, these things can happen in college baseball. You can get swept by anybody, but 3 games in a row at a very high pressure situation. Not great for Nebraska, but perhaps the only silver lining is that the path to the NCAA tournament doesn't really change. Either it's going to take a ridiculous winning streak here in the last couple of weeks of the regular season, or just win the Big Ten tournament. That's still out there. Everything's still to play for. And they'll see what they can do. Midweek contests, Omaha and South Dakota State. They will host Minnesota this weekend. So chance to get back in the right way, the winning path. But big weekend coming up as we have it. NFL draft. And Amie, you're going to be making a little bit of a trip, a couple hours away.
I am. Yeah, I'm going to Central City for the spring game for volleyball. It's a scrimmage against Wichita State. Should be fun. It's in the new Bison Dome in Central City. Tickets for that sold out in like 52 minutes, I believe. And you had to be there in person. People were camping out overnight. It's really cool. I'm excited for the atmosphere in there. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, it's going to be packed. It's going to be loud. Lots of local fans eager to see the team there. Good chance as well to see some of these new players, Mara Beeson. See how she works her way into that volleyball rotation. See how those players are kind of coming their way together. And NFL draft as well. Trey Palmer likely to be the first guy off the board. Not looking at first round, but who knows after that? Best 40-yard dash time. I mean, that usually gets you a pretty high selection there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he could very well be one of the higher Huskers taken in the past few years. Not saying highest, but among the higher ones.
Well, I mean, when it's been a wait till the 6th or the 7th round, I mean, definitely you're not wrong there. There will be several others: O'Shawn Mathis, Garrett Nelson, Caleb Tainer, Travis Vokalek, all those guys in contention to maybe be a day 3 pick. UDFAs, as always, we've seen a lot of different UDFAs latch on with teams as well. So good chance for those Huskers to secure their future NFL teams. Make sure to stay tuned, journalstar.com. I'll be locked in, glued into the to all the draft coverage. I'll claim that as work, but and of course, like I said, Amie will be there. So will our Brent Wagner. So lots of coverage there from the volleyball spring scrimmage. Wilson will be at softball. We've got a lot going on this weekend. A lot of good stuff to make sure to stay tuned to journalstar.com. But I think that'll do it for today's kind of spring football wrap up, recapping everything. We will have more details to share in the next couple weeks. But as always, appreciate all of you consistent viewers and listeners to the pod. Your support means quite a lot to us. So thank you as usual for listening to today's Life in the Red. We'll see you next week.